Hi everyone! So I'm gonna do this as like a little vlog, going over things about diseases in dairy cattle. So this is kind of a come with me to one of my calf feeding shifts at the UGA dairy. Right now, I start my shift with checking on the calves that are pretty close to calving in. Everyone looks pretty content right now. They're kind of hanging out where they eat. So I don't have a calf right now. If I did have a calf, I would have to get said calf, take her down to a hutch, give her her first vaccine, which would be the Enforce 3 vaccine. That covers respiratory diseases, BRSV, IBR, and PI3. Then we would do a navel dip to disinfect her navel and give her her first colostrum. They'll get their first colostrum when they get down there, and they'll have 2 more after that in their next 2 feedings. So I realized that I did not do an introduction in my previous clip. So hi, my name is Tristan. I'll be discussing diseases in cattle. I am, for the purpose of this video, going to mainly focus on the ones that we try to prevent in young calves, but of course they are also prevalent in adult cows. I'm also just going to kind of go over some of the things that happen when calves are born on a dairy operation, weaning of calves, and calf housing. So I had mentioned kind of the process that happens when a calf is born on a dairy operation. That includes their vaccine, their navel dip, and their colostrum. So I wanted to go over some of the respiratory diseases that vaccine we use tries to prevent. We use the Enforce 3 vaccine that covers BRSV, PI3, and IBR. BRSV is bovine respiratory syncytial virus. It's an enveloped virus that contains a negative single-stranded RNA genome that codes for 11 proteins. Symptoms include cough and nasal and ocular discharge. PI3 is parainfluenza virus 3. It is also an enveloped, non-segmented negative strand virus. It commonly contributes to tissue damage and immunosuppression. Symptoms include coughing, anorexia, pyrexia, nasal and ocular discharges, and sometimes diarrhea. Then we have IBR, infectious bovine rhinotracheitis. It is a herpes virus that grows readily in a wide variety of cell structures. Symptoms include conjunctivitis, lesions of the mucous membranes of the male and female reproductive tract, abortion, and occasionally encephalitis. So those are respiratory diseases that we worry about in cows and calves. Next up would be the navel dip when a calf is born. Most of the navel dip solutions consist of a 7% iodine solution. So it has that yellow color to it, as you can see in that top picture there. They're just dipping that calf's navel in a dip cup. Proper disinfectant of the navel has been shown to decrease calf mortality by half, and navel dipping also promotes the drying and healing of the navel. Next up, we have colostrum. Dairy producers typically separate the calf from their dam. This is to ensure that the calves receive an adequate amount of colostrum that is good quality. So when we milk it out of the mother, we actually test it and see what quality of colostrum it is to make sure that it is going to benefit the calf as it should. Calves are born with a very immature immune system, and the calf is extremely dependent on the absorption of the maternal immunoglobulin through the intestines after birth. The absorption of the maternal IG through the small intestine helps protect the calf from disease organisms while their immune system develops. So after I checked on the cows that were going to calve in pretty soon, I went and gave some grain to the younger pasture heifers. Nothing exciting about that, so I skipped that part. But right now I am feeding and refreshing the water on our lower barn calves, which is where they go after they've been weaned off of their milk replacer. So I have already fed them and I'm working on their water, but I also have to do some cord treatment. Cord comes in this big jug. It's a concentrate
So we dilute it down so that we can just give it as a drench, essentially. But you can also put it on top of their food or in their water as long as they drink it. We just like to make sure that they get it. So Corid. Corid is a scours prevention that we use. It treats or prevents coccidia, which is one of the things that cause scours in young calves. Scours and respiratory disease are some of the most prevalent things that we deal with in calves. So we try to stay ahead of that with our vaccines that I mentioned earlier. It's an intranasal vaccine that they get when they're born. And then Corid a couple of different times throughout their time in hutches and in the lower barn.
I mentioned that we use Corid as a scours prevention. Scours is really just a very broad term, and it's characterized by diarrhea. It can be broken into two categories, infectious causes and non-infectious causes. What we're trying to prevent here is an infectious cause, which is coccidia. It's a parasite. A non-infectious cause would be something like improper nutrition or environmental stress, things like that. Corid stops coccidia in the small intestine and prevents more damaging coccidiosis in the large intestine. It can be used as a drench, which is how we do it, but it can also be mixed in the drinking water or put on top of its feed. As long as they get it in their system, it should be fine. The liquid formulation ensures that the active ingredient will actually reach the intestines. And then I have on there just that coccidiosis is the infection of the coccidia parasite and is one of the main causes of scours in cattle.
So now it's time for me to give grain, water, and milk to the calves in their individual hutches. They each get their own milk bottle, their own milk, their own water, own grain. We keep them all separated until their immune systems are built up a little more. I do have some wean 1 calves out here, which means at 7 weeks old, they stop getting milk in the afternoon so that they can begin their weaning process. And then at 8 weeks, they don't get any milk at all.
In the last clip, I showed where I was about to give milk to the calves in the individual calf hutches. I mentioned weaning, so I had a few wean 1 and wean 2 babies out there with me that day. The calves start their weaning process typically at 7 weeks. That's how we do it on the dairy where I work. However, the dates of weaning process can slightly vary depending on the producer's preference. So where I work at 7 weeks, they will only get milk once per day. We do it in the morning, and then in the afternoon they just get grain and water. And then at 8 weeks, they no longer receive milk. They only receive the grain and water.
So I only have 1 bottle baby out here with me today. Hopefully I'll be able to talk while I feed her. But these calves are in individual housing. They have their own individual hutches, mostly because it helps keep them from spreading disease and germs and things like that so quickly. When they're in these individual houses, they don't spread parasites or respiratory disease quite as quickly, mostly because they're by themselves. They're in close proximity to one another, as you can see, but they are separated. It helps us keep track of individual calf health more easily. So they're in their own milk buckets. We see how much of that they can drink each day. We keep track of how much grain they're eating each day and things like that. So that goes into the proper nutrition, which keeps them healthy.
So this is just kind of reiterating what I just said about individual calf housing. I wanted to put a better picture in there since you can't really see it all that well in the vlog part of the video. This picture is not from our dairy. None of the pictures I used in this slideshow are from our dairy. But this is a good example of individual calf housing. You can see how they each have their own little hutch. They have hay bedded down in there. They can stay out of the weather in the hutch. It actually stays pretty warm in those things. So they're pretty comfy in their little houses. You can see where they have their own individual grain and water buckets. And I'm assuming wherever this is, they just bring the milk out to them when it's time for their milk. Having them housed in this individual housing system is thought to help prevent the spread of disease and parasites through direct contact. So if one has a respiratory disease, they're not spreading it to all the other calves with direct contact. They're not breathing in each other's faces, really. They are in close proximity, but they're not right on each other. Or if a calf contracts a parasite, they're not spreading their feces where other calves are going to come in contact with it. It also allows for more easily monitoring individual calf health. So I've got a calf, if they're not feeling so well, it's kind of easier to track that down as opposed to being in a group, and we can isolate that issue. It also lets us see that they're drinking all their milk, or how much grain they're intaking and how much water they're intaking. When they're in group housing, it's harder to see how much an individual calf is eating of grain or drinking their milk. It's pretty important that they have a balanced, diet, that their nutritional needs are met, because that is important for their growth and their immune system as well.
So once I am done feeding hutches, I'm doing their water right now. That's pretty much it for a calf feeding shift. We do the hutches last in the afternoons so that their morning milk feeding is as close to 12 hours apart as possible. So I'll be back here actually in the morning, and they'll get fed first at 5 o'clock. It's about 5 o'clock right now, so we're doing pretty good on time. But other than that, we are done.